Welcome to the Friendly Moms Club podcast with Jen and Karlee. We're the new mom friends you didn't know you needed.
We are creating a safe space to bring moms together, lighten the heaviness, and find joy in the everyday moments. Together, we will share our own experiences of being new moms while navigating the topics we wish more people talked about.
Join us every Monday to hear us skip the small talk and dive right into the uncomfortable. Happy Mom Day, everyone. It's Karlee here. I'm flying solo on behalf of the Friendly Moms Club podcast today. As you saw on Instagram, Jen had her little baby girl recently, so I'm representing the Friendly Moms Club today. But I'm not going to be fully solo because I will be interviewing the lovely and amazing Dr. Ali Power, who is a naturopathic doctor. She's a motherhood coach. She's also a mother. She has 2 little boys and she's got 1 on the way. She's also the co-owner of a virtual naturopathic clinic, the Virtual Health Collective. She runs that with her husband, who is also a naturopathic doctor. What I really admire about Dr. Ali is her overall approach. She has a very evidence-based approach, but then on top of that, she's just so realistic. Her recommendations are just so reasonable. Her expectations, they match where her clients are at in their lives and what capacity they have. So even today, when she goes over some really amazing tips and recommendations, they are not a one size fits all. She is really great at encouraging you to look in to see what you need and what fits best for your family. I just know that after listening to this, you are going to feel empowered to start making little changes that are truly going to change your motherhood experience. I don't want to give away any spoilers, so here we are with Dr. Ali. All right. Happy Mom Day, everyone. We have a very special guest today. We have Dr. Ali. Welcome, welcome. Oh, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
One thing I really love about your approach is that you support women and moms, which makes me really happy, is that you're not preachy and you're not elitist. And there's so much guilting and mom shaming in both the motherhood and wellness world. And then when those two intersect into moms trying to be healthy, it's just, there's so much hate and shame. And I love that you bring the opposite of that. So before we get into all of your wonderful insights, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, sounds great. Well, thank you again for having me. I'm excited to be here and chat. I love your podcast, so I'm excited to be on it. So yeah, my name's Ali. I'm a naturopathic doctor here in Langley, BC. I have 2 kids. Well, I guess 2.8. We'll call it 2.8 because I'm not going to say 2.5.
More
so I
than
have a 5-year-old. Yeah, exactly. We have a 5-year-old and an almost 3-year-old, and then pregnant with our 3rd, due in a couple months. So yeah, I mean, being a naturopathic doctor and a mom has really speared my focus of my practice towards motherhood. So basically 98% of my practice is moms with young kids, including kind of supporting the pregnancy and preconception time as well. I just found when I went through my journey I started my practice before I had kids in kind of women's health in general and supporting, menstrual health and mental health and digestion, all of these things. And then I went through the process of becoming a mom myself and just found that there were so many gaps and so many places that needed more support in that journey to and into motherhood that I really hyper-focused my practice on this time of life. And yeah, I mean, like you said at the beginning, it's like you textbooks say one thing, but your experience and the process of all of it brings a totally different lens to the way that I practice. My goal is to help moms have simple and actually attainable ways to help prioritize their health in motherhood, and understanding that that's going to fluctuate depending on the season of that you're in. But I think it's just really important that we're advocating for the health of moms, because as soon as babies are born, as we've all experienced, it's all focus on baby, how's baby, everything about baby, and really the mom gets left behind. And in a lot of cases. So that's really what I want to try to prevent, is moms not having to go 5, 6, 10 years before they get their blood work checked again after they had a baby, because it's important that we keep up on this stuff so we can show up for our family and all the things we want to do.
Reminds me of the whole saying, like, you got to put your mask on first. And moms, like, society doesn't tell moms to do that.
No.
And then but then we're expected to do it, and we're guilted and shamed when we can't help our family the way we want. I appreciate you being out there on our team, because we need it. And for anybody who has struggled with the, traditional and Western medicine, not traditional, with Western medicine, conventional, that's the word, that I feel that it did moms dirty a little, does women dirty. A lot of the research is on men, which I'm sure you know all about. And it's so frustrating. So it's nice to have kind of a fresh perspective that's also not so crunchy that you doubt it,
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, and that's kind of what I tried to do, is kind of be in between that space, right? Of like mom blogger and doctor. It's like, I want to bring both to the front of like health and evidence-based health information, but also realistic life in the trenches of motherhood. Sure. Like, what can we do? So it's kind of in that middle ground where I kind of lie. Yeah.
So for anybody who's not familiar, can you just quickly explain what naturopathic medicine is, in case someone's like, natural what?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So basically naturopathic doctors, so we go through a bachelor or an undergraduate degree, and then we go to 4 years additionally of school after that. So naturopathic medical school. So I went here, there's the school in New West that I went to here. So it's 8 years of like postgraduate education. And basically the principles of naturopathic medicine, I mean, there's a bunch of principles of it, but the biggest part for me that I find the most important is like the prevention side of things and the education side of things, where we really have a big focus on that, of like, what are we doing to prevent these things from happening in our population, in our community, and in health? And then how are we educating the people that we're seeing so that they're empowered about their own health and can take it into their own hands, and involving all aspects of their own health. Naturopathic doctors, we have a really wide scope of practice, and a really wide range of how naturopathic doctors practice. My practice in particular is quite evidence-based. So I use evidence-based treatments and modalities and things. And, like I have my prescription license. So if my patient needs a prescription, if we're talking about, say, mental health or an infection or something like that, then I have a prescription license to be able to prescribe medication and to be able to help people come off of medication if that's their goal too, which is nice to be able to combine with, the nutrition aspect and the herbs and the nutrients that we also have the education and knowledge about, to kind of help people choose a path in their health journey that feels really good for them in that time. Yeah, so that's kind of a little bit about the style of my practice. And really what I want people to be able to do is understand what's going on in their body, why they're feeling the way they are. And that usually involves lab work. So figuring out what is happening and if there's anything that we're missing in terms of the lab side of things. So like, are you low in iron? Are you low in vitamin D? Is your thyroid, something off with your thyroid? How are your hormones doing? That kind of stuff. And then making a really specific plan from there that they really understand, like, why am I taking this supplement? How long am I taking it for? And what is it going to do for me? So yeah, kind of combining all of those areas is why I love naturopathic medicine, because it does reach all of those spaces. And then in my practice, I, am in relatively close contact with my patients' GPs or OBs or midwives or whoever they're working with. So really just trying to create that collaborative care approach that we so desperately need in our motherhood world. So that's kind of my approach as a naturopathic doctor.
Yeah, I love that. I like that you act a little bit as like a bridge between like conventional medicine and then people who practice naturopathic medicine, or just even alternative modalities, whether that's something from acupuncture to homeopathy. And then you're kind of a nice bridge in between, but then also have the credentials to and the resources to help patients in that way. I see that a lot in my work in labor and delivery, that there's patients that are very much like, I'm coming in, I'm having a medicated hospital birth. That's where I am. And on the other side, people are in the far end of the spectrum where they're like, either they wanted a home birth, but were unable to and transferred. And then there's like no one in between that's like, hey, all of these things can exist on a spectrum. It doesn't have to be teams against each other. And I'm sure you see that a lot in your practice, especially with women's health, because there's so many opinions out there on you have to do it this way, you have to do it that way, when really there can be a blend of the two.
Totally. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So I also, before we go on, I want to say I
Yeah.
love that you talked about medication and how that you
Yeah.
can support either by prescribing it
Mhm.
or by combining it with other modalities or
Yeah.
even helping patients come off of it, because
Yeah.
there's so much stigma around medication. And,
Yeah.
Jen and I, we both talk about it a lot. We
Yeah,
both
absolutely.
need it, but we
Yeah.
also explore other avenues to
Yeah.
make sure that we're fitting in all of the other
Mhm.
pieces around that. So
Totally.
can you just talk a bit about, from like a naturopathic medicine
Mhm.
perspective,
Mhm.
if somebody is on medication and they're a
Mhm.
mom and say
Mhm.
they're either pregnant or postpartum and they're really
Mhm.
struggling,
Mhm.
what are some of the other ways that naturopathic medicine and your practice can
Mhm.
support women in like anywhere in the perinatal period?
Yeah, I mean, if someone is, coming in and they're already on a medication, but their mental health is still struggling, obviously we're looking at, okay, is that dose the right dose for you? Do we need a different medication? Do we need to add more? Like, do we need to add another medication? Do we need to switch the medication? So, if someone coming in and they're struggling, we're not taking them off of their medication. Generally, we're looking at what else can we do to support their system in that way. Unless, of course, what they're struggling with is a side effect from the medication, and then that's a different story. But if, for example, their mental health is still struggling, like, are they seeing a counselor? Are they getting all of that mental health kind of support? And then also looking at, like, what are the other nutrients we could maybe use that would be safe with their medication? So certain herbs that are supportive for mental health are safe with some medications and not with others. So looking at which herbs could be used to enhance or increase the effect on your nervous system of whatever, if it's low mood, if it's anxiety, whatever it is that they're experiencing. But also looking at, is there anything else that might be contributing to this anxiety? So for example, we know postpartum thyroid conditions are really common and sometimes missed. And common symptom of hypo or hyperthyroidism is anxiety or low mood. So looking like making sure, is your thyroid doing well? Low iron. There's a huge association with mental health and iron, and not just anemia, but low optimal iron. So if there's anxiety or low mood or whatever the mood concern is, how is their iron doing? Vitamin D is another huge one with mood. So lab work, again, kind of going back to that, becomes a big part of the investigation there, making sure that we're not missing some of those foundational things. And blood sugar regulation plays a huge part in mental health. Vitamin B12 can really contribute to mental health things too. So this is not an exhaustive list, but those are just some examples of some common things that we see, especially in the postpartum motherhood time, because so many of those nutrients, like, our bodies are so good at giving babies what they need in pregnancy. And so what that means is that often the mom, if they're not nourished appropriately, is left depleted of those things. And so it's a really common time for those things to become more depleted after you've had a baby or breastfed or whatever the case is. So really looking at that stuff as well to make sure that we're not missing anything there. And then there's so much that goes into mental health, but like from a support system at home, like, are they being supported? Is there that team and community that they need to help support their mental health? What does that look like for them? Does it look like more time away from baby? Does it look like more time with baby? Like, what is that? Looking at nutrition is huge. Like making sure that mom's getting enough food really is what it usually comes down to, and enough protein, and that because we know that to be such a massive impact for mental health. And most of the time when someone has a mental health concern, their go-to is like either not eating or eating a lot of like that quick hitting dopamine foods, like the carbohydrates and the pastries and that kind of stuff, which makes sense because that's what your body's craving, and usually ends up making things a little bit worse. So just figuring out how can we support them by adding some of those nutritive foods in that really help with regulating blood sugars and supporting mental health overall. So that was kind of a long-winded answer, but basically from a mental health standpoint, there's so much, but we're always also matching their capacity on where they're at, because you can't expect a mom who's struggling with depression or anxiety to start suddenly cooking herself these huge meals all the time, right? Like we have to really take small steps. So a lot of it is just figuring out where the person's at. How can we start little things to get the person feeling well enough to make some of those lifestyle changes, moving their body and that kind of stuff. Like sometimes they can't, right? Like depending on where they're at in their mental health journey, that's just not an option for them to like go for a 30-minute walk every day or cook themselves 3 eggs in the morning. It's not always an option. So much of it is just so targeted and tailored to where that mom is at, depending on where they're at in their journey.
I love that. It sounds very realistic because moms already put too much pressure on themselves to be perfect and to do everything. But then it's also like specific, like you were saying. And it sounds like a lot of these recommendations, one, like this is definitely not like a hate on conventional medicine, but it's like a lot of these things are missed if you see your family doctor because there's no time, and that's not their problem. That's not their fault. That's just, again, another way that society is not there for moms. And then there are also things that kind of sound like they compound on each other. So you start with eating more protein, and then that's going to balance your blood sugar. And if your blood sugar is balanced, you're going to go into your next meal not crashing, and maybe you don't yell at your husband for chewing loudly because you're hangry. And then it just, I like that it's like the small things, and it sounds like they do add up.
Yeah, absolutely. They totally do.
Sure.
And it's like, and I think they compound on each other as you go through your motherhood journey too. And as the seasons of that journey change, like obviously if you're in like the throes of newborn life, you're focusing on different things. And if you're like, okay, I'm like kind of sleeping a bit better more through the night, right? Like we're adapting it as you go through that journey. So yeah, I mean, I'd say the biggest thing that for me that's missed so often is that blood work piece that I get so fired up about, because so often it really has such a massive impact when we replace those nutrients that are really needed and focus on optimal levels of them for the mom. And, you know, I don't want people to have to be on 80 supplements. Like that's not the goal, right? It's like, what are the specific things we need to get you through this time that feels attainable for you? And then how can we support in other ways? But sometimes, you know, the capacity is like, I can only take a capsule. I can't like change this other piece right now. So that's actually better for those people. So really, yeah, like you said, it's just tailored to what stage they're in and what support they're needing in that moment.
But I imagine for some people, adding a supplement and then doing something simple like having a protein bar. And those two things can be huge, where I feel like myself in the past, things that I've done, I'm like, okay, I'm going to make all these changes. And then I make this list of so many unrealistic things. And then you spiral because you can't do them and it's not realistic. And there's not a lot of messaging out there about just doing the little things and like, what are these little things that you can do? So I love that approach.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, sometimes my recommendation is literally like, okay, so right now you're going to Tim Hortons after you drop your kids off at daycare to get a coffee and a muffin. Let's get an egg wrap instead of a muffin, right? Like, or let's get an egg wrap and a muffin, even if that's where we need to start, right? Like sometimes it's not drastic changes. It's like, how can we just switch something up, keep your routine the same, but switch something up so that you can get a bit more nourishment in. So the range of, and I'm not saying like everyone should go to Tim Hortons every day and get an egg wrap and that's going to fix all their problems, but you know what I mean, right? It's like, at least we're then supporting their blood sugar a little bit in the morning and getting some protein in and not making it an overwhelming change that feels like they're not going to do it. So it's really, it really is so varied, the recommendations that
I like that.
Yeah.
So say somebody is, let's say they're postpartum and they're struggling with trying to do it all, burnout. They're the tradition, not the traditional, like the kind of like the what you expect, a burnt out mom who's trying to learn how to breastfeed, struggling with mental health, not doing well mentally because they're isolating themselves. You know, just the unfortunate case we see a lot. Totally. If you had somebody like that, well, I mean, most of the time somebody like that wouldn't be seeking extra care because they don't have the capacity for it, and that's a whole other problem. That makes me sad.
Totally.
But say somebody, one of those people is listening here because, you know, maybe that's more doable. If someone is in like struggle city, they're overwhelmed, they're in the throes of newborn or even like postpartum mood disorder, what would be like 3 things that you would say that are more general kind of to a lot of moms, and they can kind of take that and fit it into their life?
Yeah. I mean, the first one would be just advocating for help of whatever that feels like to them. So whether it's their partner, like really finding somebody that you're communicating with frequently and openly about how you're doing, because I think so often that part is overlooked of how important that is, especially if we're talking, like you said, that like complete overwhelm, burnout, newborn stuff is like, who does that person need help from is my first thing. So whether it's their partner that they're communicating that with, making sure they understand how they're struggling, whether it's their midwives or OB that they are working with, whether it's another medical professional, counselor, whoever it is that they're a friend, like, you know, like just somebody that they can talk to and tell that they're not well and that they're struggling. And so that the people around them or person can help get them some support, because I think that's the part that's just missed, right? And like when I remember when we had our first baby, and second, like there's so many moments where you're just like, I don't even have capacity to like get out of bed, right? And sometimes just talking to somebody about that can just make you feel so much better, and knowing that you have a team on your side. So I'd say that would be the first one, is just really, and I think we're doing a better job in terms of like, social media and some of the practitioners of really encouraging that, just encouraging people to ask for help. I think it's getting a bit better, but just that reminder of like, it's okay. A lot of moms have felt that before you. You're not alone. You're not a bad mom, and getting help will be so much better if you get, advocate for some help. So that'd be the first thing I'd say.
And I imagine some of those moms maybe don't even realize how much they're struggling. And
Totally.
then by asking for help, they like kind of look back and they're like, oh, wow. Yeah, I did need that more than I thought. So I like that. That's kind of like, it will start like the next level too. So what would you say is number 2?
I think in terms of like where to start would be just really then like checking in with themselves in terms of like, what do I need? Which is really hard. Like I don't think I paid attention to my needs until after I had a baby, to be honest, in terms of like what I actually needed, not what like others needed from me. And so I think
that's a big one.
Yeah, it's a huge one. Right. And I think that when moms can really, most of the time you do know what you need. Most what I find in my experience is most moms, they might not know exactly how to get it or what specifics they need, but they can check in to be like, I need more sleep, or I need more, like I need less people in my house, or I need more communicating, like more time with friends, or whatever it is that they feel like would help them through that time, really checking in with what that might be. So I don't think there's a specifics there in terms of exactly what, like because everyone's going to have different things. But checking in with what they think they need. So like, I know for me in my first experience postpartum, I had so much postpartum anxiety that I didn't even realize I had. And so much of the anxiety was triggered from me trying to do what other people were telling me I should be doing, which was giving my baby to them, going on dates with my husband, getting out of the house by myself, leaving and letting him sleep, like putting him in his bed without comforting him, like all these things that people were telling me, you should be able to do that by now, or that should be able to happen. Like you should be able to go on a date with your husband in the evening by now, like he's 3 months old. And so much of my anxiety spiraled around that. Was like, none of it felt instinctual to me, but I had this messaging that I should be able to do these things by now. So for me, what I actually needed in that time was to just be like, no, I actually really want to hold my baby, and I actually want to be with my baby and comfort my baby. And that actually makes me feel better than leaving the house and having somebody else do it. Versus for my second, I had those moments of like, I need to go to a coffee shop by myself for an hour and have someone take my kid for a walk. Like that in that postpartum time, that was really helpful for my anxiety, was me stepping away and having that time to step away. So I think, those are totally different experiences, and what I needed in both those times were totally different. So I think that, tuning into what the mom actually needs in that sense would be the second.
And I think you really hit it there, where you're saying that it's not always what society is telling you need to do. For some people, it can be, like you said, I want to spend more time with my baby. For some people, it's that I need a break from my baby, and then people feel guilty about that. Yeah. Or for some people, it's like, I want to do some sort of like sleep learning or sleep training.
Totally.
But people tell them they're not supposed to do that. Where some people are like, no, I actually want to keep co-sleeping. So I like that it's like, it's a general recommendation, but you're making it specific by saying like, what, like, first, advocate for your health. Be like, I need help. And then 2, look into yourself. Like, what is it that I actually need? Like, what is it that my heart is telling me? Not what is social media or my mother-in-law or my own mother or my partner or whoever telling me that I should be doing.
Yeah. And then did you ask for 3? Do I need one more?
I mean, if you have another, you don't, if there's something else that comes up.
I mean, in terms of like the thing that I always kind of go back to with people are those foundations of health. Like, can we look at, nutrition from a nutrition standpoint? I find that the place to start, or maybe for that mom, it's like going back to, are you still taking your prenatals? Just go back to taking your prenatals. Maybe that'll help, in terms of just nourishing yourself. The third one, I feel like will kind of be determined by that, what their capacity is during that time. But what I usually say as first steps for people is, aside from like getting labs to make sure we're not missing anything there, is how can we add looking at their kind of their nutrition, and how can we add some protein in, is most of the time what it ends up being, so that you can feel more stable throughout the day. Like you said, you're not getting crashes, your irritability, your mood, your nervous system feels more relaxed. So that would probably be the next one. But again, for some people, it's actually like going outside is really the most helpful thing for them, or like doing a meditation. So it's hard to give.
But that could fall onto number 2, like what they need, right?
What they need.
And I like what you say about just going back to foundations of nutrition and just trying to get more protein, and like also suiting that to your capacity. Like I said, maybe somebody has a protein shake, or they even, drink a glass of milk, which like maybe it's not the most protein, but it's better than nothing.
It's something.
And then for some people, that means actually cooking a home cooked meal, or ordering in food, or a meal delivery service, and just the little thing. You actually recommended when we were at the Ignite Motherhood Summit, you were talking about protein, and I've always been somebody who has really tried to eat more protein because I do know I feel better. But you made a comment about the amount of protein in eggs and how I think you said like 2 is not enough protein, and I've been looking back at my breakfast lately, well, since then, and that is the one change that I have made in breakfast. I have started adding in a 3rd egg, adding in some extra egg whites, adding in some cheese, and getting like a probably triple the amount of protein I used to get in my breakfast. And I can't even tell you the difference that has made for my mental health.
Oh, good.
And I think it's stemming from blood sugar. So it was like one little thing, because I was born in the 80s. I grew up my whole teens and early 20s and even 30s in the diet culture world, and where everything's about doing everything perfectly and doing things less. So it was either like, okay, I'm focusing in on protein or I'm not. And I realized it doesn't have to be that. It can just be every day you make it a goal to be like, hey, how can I eat something more that's going to make me feel great? And it's not that I don't eat junk food. Like I love it all. But that one change has then also turned into me being able to, in the afternoon, instead of like seeking for all those dopamine foods that I thought my body wanted, now that my blood sugars are stable, all of a sudden I'm like, what do I actually feel like? Like I have time to actually now do number 2. Like, what does my body actually need right now? Totally. And what my body usually wants in the afternoon is actually protein, which is so funny, because before I'm like, no, give me the sugary foods, give me the cookies and this. And I just wish that I could have gone back to my early postpartum days and just thought more about protein, because I was in this state where I was so hungry all the time. I was making like an exceptional amount of milk. And I definitely was not nourishing myself with the right foods. And like, no shame. I was, I had a little baby. But I just wish I could have gone back and made that change, because I was like trying to eat enough to like just feel full for like 5 minutes. And I look back and I think, maybe if I just ate some protein instead of cookies, and then ate the cookies after if I wanted them.
Yeah, totally.
That feels realistic. That feels doable.
And everything is going to, what's doable for one person isn't for the other. And so it really, that's why I like love my job so much, is because it's like it's figuring out, and then that's the part, like you said before, that by no fault of the conventional system, that's missing from that system, right? Is that time to be able to be like, hey, what does your morning look like right now? Like, let's talk about what your morning routine, if you have any at that time, looks like, and how can we shift something to that doesn't feel overwhelming to help you where you're at. So I have the time in my visits to go through that with people, and I find that just the sustainability of our health decisions and the choices that we make is really what makes the most impact, even though they're not the like sexy amazing things, right? It's like usually there's not any magic most of the time to these things, or any like magic pill. It's like, how can we make these changes to help you feel better?
Social media has like brainwashed us to think we have to go these big sexy changes to like live this dream life. But what's really sexy? Longevity, and like the longevity of like the not so sexy thing. So,
and how much those day-to-day habits and things stack up on each other to make you feel well.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. The little stacking and the like momentum you get. And I think like my main takeaway from everything you just said there is like, just start with the little thing. And I feel like even with myself, I'm a perfectionist, that I'm like, well, that's not good enough.
Totally.
And I just need to remind myself that like one little thing, if I even just eat breakfast, even if it's not, like in air quotes, a great meal, just eating breakfast, or eating chicken nuggets instead of not eating lunch at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
that will just continue to kind of like
Mm-hmm.
spiral in a good way,
Yeah,
spiral upwards.
for sure.
Every day you're going to feel a little better. And
Yeah,
it's hard for perfectionists. And I think a lot
it's
of
really hard.
moms really hone into their perfectionism when they become a
Mm-hmm.
mom
Mm-hmm.
because, well, society tells us we have to be perfect.
Yeah,
And it's really hard to kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel.
it's
So
so
here
hard.
we are yelling
Yeah.
at you. Yeah. Keep going. Keep
Yeah,
going.
it is. It is totally. Yeah, we're rooting for you, and it's really about those small
For
things,
sure.
and it's hard like that. It's so easy for us, and I'm similar in that way. Like type A perfectionist, like grew up like that, and having to undo those things, and the literal act of tuning into what you need versus what other people are telling you is such a massive thing that takes so much work and effort that we don't even really talk about. You know, all of it takes work. So like giving yourself grace with all of that. And like I said, that's why I think having a team or people that are on your side supporting you in whatever that looks like is so key when you're in those phases.
Especially when you're in those like drowning phases, when you
Yeah.
can't see up or down, you don't know where everything
Totally.
is. So it's nice to have somebody in your corner who can kind of remind you of what's actually happening. Because
Yeah.
from what we're talking about, I feel like so much of this is just mindset and how we are approaching our problems and how we're approaching like the plan to tackle these problems, because it's not an all or nothing, and it's not a you have to do XYZ. It's just little manageable nibbles along the way. And that is not, at least for myself, the mindset that I've ever had. And it is even like more opposite of the mindset that I took on in motherhood, because becoming a mom like changes your brain. For some people, maybe in a good way. For me, it just made me hyper fixate on things that like are not important. So then that mindset of like just doing a little bit every day becomes even more difficult. You know, like you're either super mom or you're like you have those moments where you're like, I'm feeling like the best mom, or then you're feeling like garbage, you know?
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm going on a tangent there
That's
about
okay.
motherhood again. But one thing that we do know moms struggle with is putting themselves first, and even like society prioritizing women. So there's a lot of challenges to navigate for moms and parents to seek out healthcare for themselves, other than like the bare minimum of, you know, they need a whatever, so they go to the doctor every few years. How do you navigate that, one, as like a mom yourself, and then how do you navigate that with your patients, the demands of motherhood? Like, how do you find ways to sneak healthcare into there?
I think most of the time when people are coming to see me, they're either like at a point where they just can't do it anymore. And it's really, I mean, I think we learn really quickly in motherhood that we want to show up for ourselves and for our kids and for our family. And you learn pretty quickly that like when you don't take care of yourself, you can't do any of those things that you're trying to do. So even if you're trying to be this like mom that you want to be, but you're not taking care of yourself, that only lasts so long before you hit this phase of like, I actually can't do this anymore. And I know that something feels off in my body, that I need some help. So, I mean, I wish we weren't getting to that point before people were seeking help, but I'd say most of the time that's where it is. Yeah. I mean, navigating care, like quote unquote, self-care or like caring for ourselves, as a mom is tricky. It's hard. And it fluctuates, I think, as you go through, like I said, as you go through the motherhood journey. Like newborn life, it's going to look very different than for me where I'm at right now with a 5 and almost 3-year-old, right? Like there's way more space and capacity now in my day-to-day for me to do things for myself than there was then. And so it's really like adapting to where you're at in your journey, and again, tuning back into what those needs, you feel like those needs are for yourself. And then having, I think, in terms of like, if you have a partner at home, being really communicative with them about all of this, I think is just so key, because so often in a household, the mom's needs and extra stuff is put at the bottom of the list or the bottom of the calendar, or added to the calendar last, or fit in where it can be fit in, versus if we switch that around. Like, so in our house, it's, you know, our kids do less stuff because my husband and I need to do things for ourselves too. And we can't have every evening filled with a kid activity, because my husband, he loves bike riding and he loves to go snowboarding and he loves to do those things. And so And I love, I mean, I'm not right now, but I love going to my dance class, and I love having a bit of time at a coffee shop each week. And so we really do try to, in our house, and what I try to encourage people to do is like, your family is, you know, you're all equals in your family, like your kids. Obviously, sometimes there's times where you need to prioritize your kids over yourself. And that's totally understandable. But from a whole, like your health still matters, and your husband's health still matters. And how can we, you know, incorporate those? So for us, it's like, okay, my dance class is on Tuesday. So like, we're not doing soccer on a Tuesday night because I don't want to give that down. I know how important that is to me and my mental health, and I don't want to give that up. And so what else could we fit in? Do we need to do a different soccer league or whatever to make that his soccer still work and my dance work, like, right, for my older child. So I think it's really about like rewriting that narrative that most of us were raised with, where the mom always comes last in the whole scheme of a family unit.
The whole martyrdom that.
Yeah. And like, you know, I want my kids to see that I prioritize, like, that's important for me, that they see that like we all matter in this family and all of our needs matter. And how can we, so we're going to have these conversations as a family to see how all of our needs can still be met as all of us, not just one or two of us.
Them, yeah. And I like that, because then going forward, as they become adults and have their own families, if they do, it's almost like they won't have this issue of how to navigate your own like mental health and your own physical health as a parent, because it's just something that they have been taught to prioritize. Like it's not this, you have to like untrain and retrain. It's just continuing what you have always seen and modeled by your parents. You also mentioned, I think it was social media. You had a reel that went pretty viral about doing the laundry with your kids.
Oh yeah.
Is that what it was? Laundry? And I keep thinking about that when you're talking about like doing less like scheduled activities with your kids. Because I've heard people say before, like your Saturday activity doesn't have to be 700 play dates. It can just be doing stuff at home, because you know what's fun for a kid? Putting stuff in the washing machine, loading dishes, sorting laundry. And like, these are things that we can do with our kids and then also accomplish off our list, because they're things we have to do. And it reminded me of that reel of yours.
Yeah. When I had our second, I quickly realized that I couldn't, like, nap times. Like with my first, it was like, okay, he's sleeping, I'm gonna get 8,000 things done while he's napping. And I wish I like learned earlier that I needed time for myself during that time to reset, so that I could get through the evening without, like, I mean, not that I don't yell, but less chance of yelling and feeling that overstimulated, overtriggered. So I started doing that kind of stuff with the kids and incorporating them in the tasks that I had to do. And I find that really helpful to kind of try to incorporate them. And it's kind of, it's like, you know, it's slower. And sometimes I don't have the capacity for it. Sometimes I'm like, I'm going to bake muffins when the kids are sleeping tonight, because I actually just want to do that. And I want to put a podcast in and do it myself. And that's fine too. And I don't have the capacity for it all the time to include them in those things, but when I do, and when I save that space that I have a little break in the day for doing something for me, it's really impactful and makes a massive difference, I find.
And that just brings us back to that was your second tip, is like actually tuning into what you need. So instead of just thinking that nap time has to be productive time, that asking like, hey, during this nap time, or when kids at daycare, or after bedtime, like, what is it that will actually make me feel my best? Is it actually being productive, so that I'm not thinking about replying to emails when I'm trying to have dinner with my family? Is it doing something around the house so that then we can go to a play date we set up? Or is it sitting on the couch and eating chocolate and watching Bravo so that when your kid gets up, you can actually do something with them because you're refreshed? Because I think the nap time struggle, it's real in moms, like especially back to that perfectionist tendency. I thought like nap time, I have to do everything. And then I realized like, no, naps are for me. And maybe that means productive. Maybe it means sitting on the couch, and maybe it means, you know, a combo of the two. But I like that you were saying.
Yeah. And then for us, for activities, we're, like I said, my oldest is only 5, so we're in the beginning stages of like after school activities. So I'm sure this will continue to shift as we go through, but it's important for us to have the space to have that downtime. And each kid is different. Like our oldest, actually, what we're finding is he really wants to do more. So we picked we picked soccer this year, and we do swimming because when we can get into swimming
Yeah,
lesson.
I know.
We
It's
do
so
swimming.
tough.
Yeah, because that's for us. That's like a life skill important. We that's not really an option for our kids right now, but
For sure.
and so it's just like learning. And then we have one, you know, our soon to be middle is in gymnastics. It's in one thing. So we have one thing for each of them. And that is like, okay, that's it. We're not committing to anything else. And we're going to try and see how that goes. And, you know, just kind of and my partner and I are constantly communicating about like, hey, how is this feeling for our family? Is it feeling like we need more? We could add capacity for more. What would that take away? Because everything, if you add something, you're taking away something else, right? So if we're adding another evening activity for our oldest, what else is that changing? And what else is that taking away? So it's just like this constant evolving and checking in with each other and checking with, you know, all of it, which can be exhausting sometimes. But I find instead of just committing to the things because you feel like you should be doing it, like you said, like play date and we literally have to block off in our Gmail calendar, like we block it off, like we literally from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Don't book anything. Like that's how we have to remind ourselves, like we don't need to fill our calendar. We don't need to fill our time. We don't feel well on Monday if we have a super packed back-to-back weekend with activities and play dates. None of us thrive for the next week. So we have to like constantly be communicating and reminding ourselves about that, like what's working for our family right now. So I think back to that, like communicating with your partner, checking in with yourselves, like it's so key to like all aspects of wellness and you know, that your mental and your physical health for the following week is there's so many pieces that continue to evolve.
I feel like the underlying theme of everything you just said is boundaries.
For sure.
Boundaries with yourself, boundaries with your partner, with your family.
And really learning like what that looks like for your family unit at this stage that you're in, instead of trying to make it look like somebody else's family unit or else somebody else is doing and what's working for them. Like just going inwards to your little unit of what's working and what's not.
So some things that I see that have worked for your family is the family calendar. That sounds very helpful. My husband and I also have one. See, either you do a paper one in the kitchen, like old school, you have a notes app together, something that you guys can communicate with each other. And then I like how you said, like for you guys, for your family, limiting to one activity per child. And then maybe for others, it's limiting to, you know, 3 or 4. Maybe it's doing no activities. Maybe it's having, you know, every night we have an hour of afternoon or outdoor sports play that we do together. And like, maybe that's the activity, but just kind of realizing that because other people are doing, you know, lacrosse, soccer, ballet, gymnastics doesn't mean you have to do that for your family. Looking into your family, that might not be what's best for them. And I like that.
And it feels like it, like even at a 5-year-old, like it already feels like there's that pressure of like, oh, there's so many of kids his age in his class or in his, you know, of his age group do 3 or 4 activities. And there is that pressure of like, are we doing enough? Should he be doing, is he going to be missing out? Is he not going to be like, you know, and it's so wild and so quickly have to be like, check those feelings for me and be like, wait, that's not my feeling. That's actually just like, that's not what I actually think about this. It's just what society's telling me to think. And I need to really, so it's a constant like work and evolution from when you're used to being, like you said, that perfectionist type A, let's do it all. Let's add more. That's easier for us than adding less, than taking away.
I actually felt that same pressure in the newborn days, which is wild because he was a freaking newborn.
It's like, are you in music class? Are you in swimming lessons?
Yes.
Are you in baby groups?
The damn
library,
music class.
Library, what reading book things? There's so many.
Oh, so hard. And the thing is that like I love doing all those activities, but then as I was filling my calendar, I was realizing I can't be doing more than one every day. And then I had to look in and like what makes me feel best. And I figured it out that doing one activity, I think I had like 3 or 4 days I'd have an activity, short activity. And I liked that. And then I'd have one day where I did nothing. And then I also had to set boundaries with myself that even though I wanted to do the music class and all of my friends were doing the music class, doesn't mean that that's what's going to bring me joy and actually make me feel best. And I actually had to like have that boundary with myself. Like, no, I can't add a second activity for that day because that's actually not what's going to make me feel best. I'm going to go do this mom and baby workout class instead because that's actually what I want to do. And Henry was like 5 months at the time and he's like, I don't care, just plot me wherever. It's all social to him, you know? So it's like it starts early. Like I actually felt that it was last summer. So he would have been maybe 6-7 months old and I was already feeling like I wasn't doing enough. I worried for like the school age, but now I'm going into it. I'm going to advocate for what I need. I'm going to actually look to know what I need. And I'm also going to be eating some protein so that I'm not having blood sugar spikes and yelling at people about music class.
Totally.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah. But yeah, those
goodness.
are a few things that work for us. And then the other thing for my husband and I is a weekly kind of like check in with each other. Like we call it our marriage meeting, but basically like it's an excuse for
Love
us to go to
that.
a coffee shop together and chat. And that we started with our business. Because we have our businesses together. So we work together too. So we started that as like
Yes.
a
Yep.
weekly staff meeting, kind of courtesy of our business coaches helped us kind of implement that every week. But what we realized was it was so helpful to just be checking in, having that dedicated time to check in every week about our business. But we also had so many things about personal stuff to talk about that we ended up adding like a more personal one too. And most weeks that happens. I'd say it's not every week, but most weeks we really try to honor that commitment with each other. And that helps so much just to be like, usually we just say, okay, what happened? How was this last week? Like, was there anything that we could kind of change, or what went well, what didn't go so well? Let's look at our weekend. Let's look at next week and what it looks like, and how can we help each other? How can I help you? How can you help me for our week ahead? And that has been something more recent, like in the last 6 months that we've started. And it's been really, really helpful, because so much of that, so often those conversations were happening, like we're trying to do them over a meal, or like, and you just can't, like you can't focus on each other.
Kids.
Yeah, it's like chaos. Or after the kids go to bed and we're just both so tired that we just don't have the capacity to do it. So for us, it involved like scheduling it during the week. That weekly check-in with each other has made such a massive impact. And for some people that looks like putting a show on a Saturday morning for your kids so that you can connect and talk about it, right? Like it doesn't have to be this perfect thing, but that's another strategy that's really helped us in terms of staying consistent about tuning into our needs and our family's needs.
I feel like that marriage meeting can solve so many problems,
right?
Like from marital disputes to like actual health stuff, like a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot today about actual health and things that you can do for your health. And we kind of keep coming back to mental health and mindset. That's kind of like the overarching theme in all of this. So our podcast, we're the Friendly Moms Club, and we used to have something called the Mom Day Mantra, where we told ourselves, like a reassuring quote, but we're kind of shifting now. And one thing we're going to be talking about more is how can we be more friendly to ourselves as moms, to our own inner mom. So my question for you, what is something in either your personal opinion or professional opinion that moms can do to just be more friendly to themselves?
I mean, we kind of already talked about it, but I think that skill and practicing tuning in to your own self and your own needs really is foundational to making those other changes in your life, because we just can't make change from places of guilt and shame. Like change doesn't happen from those places. It happens from
tattoo that on my forehead.
Yeah, like it happens from places where you feel empowered and excited to make change, not that you feel shamed or guilted into. And so I think that skill of learning to tune into yourself about what you need is like imperative to being friendly to yourself, because then it allows you to have at least know what you want. And then, I mean, communicating that and setting the boundaries around that is a whole other beast. But at least that starting point of understanding what you want and need would be probably my top thing for how you can be.
The friendliest thing you can do to yourself is, it's not even making yourself the number one priority, but actually just acknowledging like what it is that you need.
Yeah.
And then that can sometimes even help you prioritize your kids in a new way, because you're caring for yourself. I love it.
It does.
That I feel like is advice that so many moms need and are not getting. And I really like what you said about how you can't, I can't remember how you worded it, but you can't like inspire change from guilt and shame.
Yeah.
And it's like you can't will your way into doing things. And I think moms need to hear that. And I think moms need to hear a lot more about your perspective and things that you know and things that you share about. So why don't you tell everybody where they can find you on socials, and then a little bit, we actually didn't even mention what your clinic is and that you and your husband actually own your own clinic. So we can kind of get into that real quick.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, social media, Dr. Ali Power.
Yep.
So Instagram is kind of where I'm the most active there. My website's the same, dralipower.com. And my husband and I, we have a mostly virtual health clinic. So he sees men and dads and I see women and moms, and we see patients mostly virtually. My husband's a naturopathic doctor as well. I should say he's not just hanging out with people. Yeah. And so we're based out of Fort Langley, BC, but we can see patients all over British Columbia with our virtual practice. And we have some exciting things that we're hoping to start
Ooh.
up soon. But right now I have an online, as well, an online course that I run called Putting Mama First. And so I will be running that probably in the spring. That is like a small group kind of coaching program where we go through lots of this stuff that we talked about today, plus lots more. Like what do your hormones look like postpartum? What does that mean? And what happens, and how can you support yourself? How do you support your energy? How do you form boundaries in motherhood? Like so much stuff we chat about in that 6-week course. So that's a really nice one. And it brings a small group of moms together too, which I love. And people feel less alone. So that's another great way to work with me. And then, one-to-one care. I'm not taking new patients right now because I'm going on mat leave pretty soon. But then once I return in the summer, I'll be probably starting to take new patients again. So that's where you can find me.
That's wonderful. So people can start with the little tips that they learned today, and then come summer or fall, when they're ready to kick things into high gear, they can come and join you. And I'm smelling in the future, we'd love to have you on to share a little bit more actually about like hormones and what really goes on behind the scenes, because that I find is like such a missing gap in the world, that people are either trying to get pregnant or pregnant and having a baby, and they're like, what's progesterone? And like, no shame to them, because society's not teaching us, and that can be a down the road after baby, after you've recovered and taken your time. So
that sounds great. I love that.
Wonderful. I'll make sure that I link everything about you down below, and then people can find you. And even if, since you're not taking new clients for a while, even just following you on Instagram, you have lots of great stuff. And I imagine your clinic
I'll
also
be quite active on there too.
Yeah. Sure. Get a little behind the scenes of mom life from a naturopathic doctor.
Third baby life, whatever that's going to look like. I'm not sure.
Oh, I'm excited to see. I'm very excited. Yeah. So, well, congratulations in advance on your little one. Is it another boy? Is
another
that
boy? Yeah. So it's your third boy.
I love it.
Yeah.
My husband's from a family of 4 boys, and I just feel like I don't know, I just love it. The boy gang.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's all new for me. I have a sister. So the whole boy life is very new for me. It's incredible and crazy and busy. We're currently just trying to decide how we can put like a jungle gym in our living room, because that's what we need right now. Like,
because they'll make it one regardless. Oh my gosh,
because it is one. So we need like something they can climb and something they can crash into or jump off of, because the energy is wild over here.
Yeah. Well, that's in store for me in a little bit. But anyways, congratulations in advance. Thank you so much. We appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule to come on and help our listeners. So
thanks, Karlee, for having me.
Appreciate it. All right. Bye, guys.